Rain hammered against the windows of the little cafe called The Lighthouse, tucked between wet streets in the Logan Square neighborhood. It was 8:23 in the morning, just another Monday for almost everyone, but not for Sofia Martinez. For her, every day was a battle against the clock, against the pennies that never stretched far enough, against the exhaustion that settled deep in her bones. With her apron tied around her waist and her hair pulled back in a tight braid, Sofia served coffee with the skill of someone who'd memorized the steps, but not the rest. She smiled mechanically at a customer who barely looked up. Her mind was somewhere else, at the clinic where her mother, Rosa, was waiting for a call that never came. The surgery she needed cost $15,000, an absurd number, a distant dream, an impossible wall. They lived in a two-bedroom apartment with leaks in the ceiling and a TV that had been broken since last year. Sofia worked double shifts, even cleaned bathrooms at night when someone asked. And still, she barely scraped together enough for medications, rent, and a little rice. That morning, the rain scared off customers. Only 3 tables were occupied, and the silence made the ticking of the clock more obvious. The boss, as always, was in the back checking invoices. Then the cafe door swung open hard. A man rushed in, soaked from his neck to his shoes, though the suit he wore clearly cost more than Sofia's car, if she had one. His hair was disheveled, his shirt plastered to his body, and his face was tense, like every second mattered. "Excuse me," he said breathlessly, heading to the counter. "Can you give me an Americano and a croissant? I have a meeting. It's urgent. I lost my wallet in the cab and—" The words hung in the air, uncomfortable. One of Sofia's co-workers let out a muffled laugh. Another server looked at him suspiciously. "No money? So what do you want us to do about it, buddy?" one of them said flatly, wiping his hands with a rag. The man lowered his gaze. For a second he seemed more human than imposing. He wasn't just another customer. He was someone on the edge of collapse. Sofia watched it all in silence. She felt a knot in her stomach, not just from the scene, but because she knew what it was like to ask for help and not receive it. She knew what it was like to count coins for the train, beg for a discount at the pharmacy, or pretend she wasn't hungry when her mother offered her the last plate of beans. She pulled out her wallet. There was only one $10 bill. It was all she had until Friday. If she spent it, there'd be no food at home, no CTA fare, nothing. But something heavier weighed inside her. An impulse stronger than fear. A voice that said, "Do the right thing." She walked up to the counter and, without a word, put the bill in the register. "The coffee and croissant are on me," she said quietly. The man looked at her, surprised. The disbelief was clear in his eyes. "Are you sure? You don't have to do this." "Of course I don't have to," she replied with a small smile. "But I want to. Today for you, tomorrow for someone else." He nodded, moved. He didn't know what to say. He took the coffee, grateful. Before leaving, he turned back one last time. "Thank you. I'm Michael Harrison. I won't forget this." Sofia just nodded, not recognizing the name, not suspecting what that gesture would trigger. That afternoon, the shift ended slower than usual. The boss barely said thanks as he left. Her shoes were soaked, and the dampness chilled her to the bone. She walked home without an umbrella, crossing avenues jammed with impatient cars and drenched vendors. When she reached the building, she climbed the rusty stairs to the 3rd floor. She opened the door carefully to avoid waking her mother, but Rosa was awake, coughing on the couch wrapped in a thin blanket. "How was work, Mija?" she asked in a weak voice. "Same as always," Sofia replied, forcing a smile. "But don't worry, we're getting closer to the goal." She was lying. They hadn't even saved half. But she lied out of love, the way people with broken hope but intact hearts do. That night, Sofia had tea and crackers for dinner, the last ones in the package. Then she lay down next to her mother, hugging her from behind like when she was a little girl. In silence, she thought about the man from the cafe, his desperate look, his name that meant nothing to her. Had she done the right thing? The answer didn't come in the form of money or certainty, only in the peace she felt in her chest, the same peace that let her sleep soundly, even though she didn't know what she'd eat tomorrow. What she didn't know was that this small act of compassion had already begun to turn the gears of a destiny that would change her life forever. The clock read 9:15 in the morning when Michael Harrison arrived at the 42nd floor of one of the most modern towers on Michigan Avenue. The meeting with international investors had already started without him. His assistant, nervous, handed him a towel to dry his still damp hair, but he barely reacted. "Everything okay, Mr. Harrison?" she asked, following him down the hallway. Michael didn't answer. His mind was still tied to the little cafe in Logan Square, to the unexpected gesture from a young woman he didn't know, but who had given him something he hadn't received in a long time: genuine compassion. Throughout the entire meeting his body was present, but his attention floated far away. Numbers slid past him without leaving a trace: growth charts, market projections, new partnerships. It all seemed empty compared to that simple scene where a stranger, asking nothing in return, helped him without knowing who he was. Who was she? Why did she help me? What would my mother do if she were still alive? The memory of his mother, Helen, hit him like a gust of wind. She had also been a waitress. She taught him never to look down on anyone, to value small gestures. She died when he was 28, the same age he guessed that young woman with the big eyes and calm voice to be. That afternoon, Michael did something he never did. He cancelled the rest of his meetings. No one argued. When the CEO of one of the most powerful industrial conglomerates in the Midwest makes a decision, no one questions it. He got in his car without a driver and returned to the Lighthouse Cafe. When he entered, the place was a bit fuller than the morning before. He recognized the counter, the tables, even the small dried coffee stain in the corner of the floor. But she wasn't there. He approached the cashier. This time he had cash, though money seemed irrelevant. "Hi. Yesterday a waitress helped me. She had her hair in a braid, thin, brown skin. I think her name is Sophia." The young man behind the register looked at him with some caution. "The one who paid for your coffee and croissant?" Michael nodded. "Yes, that's her. I need to know who she is." The young man hesitated. Michael understood that his presence might seem suspicious, so he pulled out a business card. "I'm not looking to bother her, I just want to thank her. It's important." When he saw the name printed, Michael Harrison, CEO of Harrison & Partners, the young man's eyes widened. Without saying anything else, he went to the back room and called the owner. Within minutes, Michael was sitting in a makeshift office, reviewing the previous day's security camera footage. There she was, framed by the poor resolution of the video, but unmistakable. The way she approached, the decision with which she opened her wallet, the kind gesture as she extended the bill. The cafe owner, a middle-aged man with a thin mustache and wrinkled shirt, approached from behind. "Her name is Sophia Martinez. She lives nearby on Wrightwood Avenue, I think. Hard worker like few others, but life hasn't been easy on her." Michael frowned. "What do you mean?" "Her mum is very sick. Needs an expensive surgery. Sophia kills herself here every day, never asks for favors. Has no family to back her up." The words hit him like a stone in the chest. It was more than he'd imagined. Not only had she used her last dollars for someone she didn't know, but she'd done it despite living through a personal tragedy. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. Meanwhile, at another point in the city, Sophia returned from the hospital with swollen eyes from crying. The doctor was clear. The surgery needed to happen soon. There were signs the illness was progressing. Rosa, who had always been strong as an oak, could now barely stand. That afternoon, arriving at the cafe to cover the evening shift, Sophia locked herself in the bathroom for 15 minutes. She cried silently, with her hands over her mouth to keep quiet. No one asked about her. No one knew. That was her life. Pain in silence, struggle without witnesses. When she came out, she put on her apron, tied her hair back firmly, and smiled at the customers. She had to keep going. There was no other choice. That same night, Michael, from his penthouse in the Gold Coast, opened his laptop. He set aside financial reports and began writing an email. The recipient, a closed circle of business people, friends, and trusted allies. In the subject line, he simply wrote, "What $10 is worth." He attached the video from the cafe, the summarized story he'd found out, and a proposal. Not charity, but an investment in humanity. He asked them not to think like business people for a moment, but as sons, as parents, as human beings. The next morning, before the sun came up, he already had more than 40 responses, all with the same phrase, "Count me in." And in the middle of his desk, Michael left an envelope with $20,000 in cash. On top, a handwritten note. For Sofia Martinez. Thank you for reminding me who I am. The sky over Logan Square was clear for the first time in days. Sunlight filtered between the old buildings and treetops, as if the universe had decided to take a breath. But at the lighthouse, the atmosphere was tense. Sofia hadn't slept well. The doctor's news echoed in her head like a cruel echo. "We need to operate on your mother in the next few weeks, or we could lose her." She'd been living for days with an empty stomach, her soul on pause, and her dreams on hold. Every time she smiled while serving a table, it was a small battle won against exhaustion, against fear, against time. That morning, right at 9 o'clock, the cafe door opened, and it wasn't like any other entrance. It was an eruption from another world. First, a man dressed in an impeccable suit, dark, tailored Italian, entered. Behind him, 2 more people, a young man with a folder in hand and a woman with a tablet. No one knew them, but everyone looked. And not with curiosity, but with bewilderment. Michael Harrison had returned, but this time he didn't come alone. He came with a mission. "Is Sofia Martinez here?" he asked in a firm but kind voice. The cafe owner, surprised, just pointed toward the kitchen. Sofia was there washing her hands, unaware that her life was about to change forever. When she came out and saw him, her heart skipped a beat. She recognized him immediately, though now he wasn't soaked or desperate. Now he was something else. He was someone important. "You?" she asked, not knowing whether to be worried or intrigued. Michael smiled. He gestured for her to accompany him outside. Sofia followed him, confused. Outside, on a terrace table, there was a thick envelope sealed with a gold seal. Michael picked it up and handed it to her. "This is for you." Sofia frowned. "What is this?" "Open it." With trembling hands, she opened the envelope. Inside, bills, many, hundreds, piles. They were organized in stacks, each with a bank band. It took her a few seconds to process what she was seeing. "Is this real?" she whispered, breathless. $20,000. Michael adjusted his tie. $15,000 is for your mother's surgery. $5,000 so you don't have to worry about immediate needs, food, rent, transportation. Sofia took half a step back, as if the ground beneath her was moving. She pressed the envelope against her chest and shook her head. "No, this must be a mistake. I can't accept this. Michael raised a hand to stop her. "It's not a mistake. It's what's right. You did the right thing when no one else did. When I was just a soaked stranger without money, you offered me the only thing you had. Without asking for anything, without conditions." Sofia could no longer hold back the tears. Her knees weakened, and she sat in the nearest chair. The cafe customers watched them from inside, between confused and amazed. But Michael wasn't finished. "That's not all." Sofia looked up. Her eyes were swollen and her breathing was labored. "I shared your story with a group of business people, friends of mine. People with power, with resources, but who sometimes forget the most basic thing, humanity. And they all agreed on one thing. You gave us back something we'd lost, faith." Sofia could only look at him. Michael continued, "That's why starting today you have a full university scholarship so you can study whatever career you want, at the institution of your choice. 3 job offers, with salaries of $50,000 a year, minimum. They're already waiting for your decision. A fully furnished and paid-for apartment in a safe and central area so you can live with your mom without worrying about rent. A permanent medical fund for her treatments, medications, checkups, everything covered. And in addition, access to a business mentorship program with some of the most important leaders in the Midwest and the country in case you ever decide to start your own project." Sofia broke down crying, this time without trying to contain herself. She cried like a child, like someone who's carried the world alone for too long and suddenly is allowed to let it go. Michael offered her a tissue. "You saved me that day," he said sincerely. Not because of the coffee or the croissant, but because of what you represented. You reminded me of my mother. You reminded me what it means to have principles, even when you have nothing. That can't be bought, but it can be thanked. Sophia tried to speak, but words wouldn't come out. She hugged the envelope as if it were a lifeline in the middle of a shipwreck. It was more than money. It was hope. It was restored dignity. Michael stood up and gave her a card. Here's my direct number. Call me when you're ready to make decisions. All of this is yours. The only thing we ask is that when you can, you do the same for someone else. She nodded, still with tears running down her face. Thank you. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. You already said everything that day with your actions. Before leaving, Michael bowed slightly in a sign of respect. She stayed there alone with the sun illuminating the envelope, as if the universe also recognized what had just happened. The cafe employees slowly came out, not fully understanding, but knowing something extraordinary had just occurred. That night, Sophia walked home in silence. She didn't take the train. She walked with the envelope pressed against her chest, as if it were a promise. When she entered, her mother was waiting on the couch, as always. How was work, Mija? Sophia knelt in front of her and smiled for the first time in weeks. Good, Mum, we did good, really good. The operating room was cold, lit by lights that seemed too bright for a cloudy morning. Sophia held her mother's hand while the nurses prepared the gurney. Rosa, with a serene look, smiled at her as if she already knew everything would be okay. Now, Hija. We're going to be okay, she whispered in a broken voice. Sophia couldn't help but cry, but this time not from fear or desperation. She cried from relief, from gratitude, from hope. Thanks to the gesture of a stranger who had decided to return the kindness he received, the surgery was performed without complications. Rosa spent weeks in recovery, but each day was better. She was smiling again, walking again, being the strong woman she'd always been again. Meanwhile, Sophia began building her new future. She chose to study international relations at one of the best private universities in the state. She devoured every class hungrily, not just for knowledge, but for purpose. She attended conferences, worked part-time at one of the companies that offered her employment, and at night cared for her mother. She slept little but smiled a lot. Michael Harrison became a silent but constant mentor. They often met for coffee. This time he always paid, and talked about life, the country, the dreams that still needed to be fulfilled. One day, while walking through Lincoln Park, Sophia told him something she'd been developing for months. I want to do something big. I want to give back what I received. Michael looked at her with interest. What do you have in mind? She pulled out a notebook, always wrinkled from use. On the cover, in blue ink, it read, The $10. I want to create an organization, she explained, that helps people who, like me, are in crisis, but still act with empathy. People who do the right thing even when they have nothing. Michael smiled. There was something about that idea that sounded right, authentic. Let's do it. And so the non-profit The $10 was born. With the support of his network of contacts, Sophia managed to bring together a team of professionals, volunteers, and donors. In less than a year, the program had already helped more than 100 people. Single mothers, homeless youth, elderly people caring for their grandchildren, brilliant students without resources. Each story was a chain of solidarity that started with a small act of compassion. Sophia's story went viral almost without her noticing. A journalist wrote an article titled, The Woman Who Changed Her Life with Coffee and a Croissant, and within days, media outlets across the country wanted to interview her. She appeared on morning shows, in magazines, on podcasts. She was invited to give talks at universities. Her speech combined humility and firmness, emotions and data, but above all, a central message. You don't need to be rich to transform a life. You need heart. Michael, for his part, redefined his company's mission. He created a department exclusively for social development. He funded educational projects, health foundations, women entrepreneur initiatives. And every time they asked him why, he responded with the same story. that of a waitress who, without knowing who he was, decided to help him. The most emotional moment came a year later, when Sophia was invited to speak at a business leadership summit in Washington, D.C. Dressed in a simple white suit, she stepped up to the podium in front of CEOs, senators, ministers, and television cameras. Her voice didn't tremble. "I'm not extraordinary," she began. "I just had the opportunity to act with compassion, like many people do every day without anyone noticing. The difference was that this compassion came back to me multiplied. That's the power of an act of kindness. It can ignite fires in places where there were no embers left." The ovation was long, sincere. It wasn't just for her story, it was for what she represented. Months later, the $10 expanded to other cities across the country. The network grew, the impact multiplied, and in every office, in every folder, in every speech, there was only one phrase that guided their philosophy: do the right thing even when no one is watching. One day, while walking past the same cafe where it all began, Sophia stopped in front of the corner table. The same one where Michael had sat soaked, desperate. She closed her eyes for a second. Everything was the same, but nothing was the same. A new waitress approached her. "Can I get you something?" Sophia smiled. "Just a coffee. And if someone comes in without money, give it to them anyway. It could be the beginning of something wonderful." Because small acts, when done from the heart, have a power that neither logic nor money can explain. And it all started with $10.